All right, everybody, welcome back to Most Modern. This is real quick for the week of March 29th, 2025. A massive 7.7 magnitude earthquake hits Myanmar and is felt across Southeast Asia. Over 1,600 dead and plenty of structures have fallen. CEQA reform bill is proposed in California to fast-track infill housing. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac leadership is shaken up under the new FHFA director, Bill Pulte. Athens announces an airport expansion aiming to increase passengers to 40 million by the year 2032, and Boston's One Lincoln office tower sells at a foreclosure auction for $400 million, down from a previous valuation of $1 billion. I'm Alex Yuen here with Minkyu Kang. This is Real Quick.
모스트 보던 팟캐스트.
All right, jumping in right here, topic number one, this earthquake that's hit Thailand and Burma. As you can see here, this epicenter was in Myanmar, but is spread around throughout the west side of Southeast Asia. So it's a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit on Friday the 28th, just yesterday. The epicenter was near Mandalay in Myanmar, and tremors were felt across Bangladesh, China, and India, triggering a lot of panic and evacuations. The quake was then followed by a 6.4 magnitude aftershock, which really got in the way of actually rescuing and helping people in those efforts. So Myanmar, unfortunately, has reported over 1,600 dead, 3,400 injured, and over 139 still missing. And Thailand actually saw at least 10 deaths, mostly from the collapse of a skyscraper that was under construction in Bangkok. I don't know if people have seen that, but those images are still coming in, but they're quite intense. Multiple residential towers, bridges, and civic buildings have fallen down in Mandalay and Naypyidaw in Myanmar and Burma. That's where the extent of the damage has really been felt. Major structural damage or completely full collapse, like you see here on the left-hand side of the screen. Hospitals have been overwhelmed, and on the right you see a high-rise in Bangkok that swayed for quite a long time. There you can see the water coming out of the pool. Other high rises have experienced major structural damage. Sky bridges have been broken, and in one case complete collapse of an under construction building.
Oh my
God. State of emergency in Myanmar, and many, I guess, I don't know how to say this, it's so difficult. Anyway, so we're going to take this from the physical built environment perspective. Why did these buildings fall down? I think it comes down to, well, unfortunately, just lack of quality in construction. And this is really the steelman argument for why we have building code. You know, we don't want this type of thing to happen. We have to go through hoops, and we have to go through measures and make sure there's checks and balances to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't occur in the first place. But when you have a developing country, things go quickly. And to be quite frank, what's kind of surprising is, this is not what you think of when you think of Southeast Asia. You don't think of large earthquakes.
Exactly. So how can you prepare for a disaster that never happened to you before?
Yeah, and who knows when a lot of these buildings were being built. In this case of the one in Bangkok that was under construction, obviously you can't expect buildings that are being formed to be up to code right away. It's kind of a very unfortunate situation. But another reason for this is apparently that the epicenter of the earthquake was relatively shallow within the Earth's terrain, and so that led to just a more intense shaking on the surface. Okay, moving on to California, where there's different types of problems. Of course, it's also a seismic zone, but here we're talking about legislation. So I don't know if people out there have heard about CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. It's come under a lot of criticism lately, especially around the topic of abundance and creating more housing, because while its intentions are noble to make sure that the natural beauty of California is maintained, a lot of times it becomes just another piece of red tape that one has to sort through in order to develop, or in other cases, it actually becomes weaponized in California to prevent new construction. So in this case, Assemblymember Buffy Wicks is pushing a bill to exempt most infill housing projects from CEQA. Infill housing basically means it's within an existing urban context. So you're not talking about greenfield, you're not talking about going out to somewhere that hasn't yet been built and developed and developing new housing. This is talking about that empty lot, that parking lot, that abandoned building that needs to be redeveloped in an existing urban fabric. So the motivation really is to speed up construction and to help get rid of a lot of these layers and layers of policy and regulation that we have to go through to even get started on constructing buildings. In my mind, I think it's well overdue. It's very hard to judge legislation on its quality just by its tagline. There are always other things. There's always other concessions that come into play here. So does this mean we get rid of CEQA and we add a whole bunch of other restrictions? We have to use non-union labor. We have to do this or that. We have to source certain types of materials. what is the juice worth the squeeze in that case? It's hard to say, but I think that the sentiment is good.
What does CEQA actually do? How can they stop development?
Well, basically, it requires you to submit some sort of report, you have to file all the paperwork in order to actually get moving forward. And there's been examples of cases where the project is ready to go and the paperwork wasn't filed correctly, and then you have to stop
Oh,
it.
shoot.
And so, as we know in the development and in the building game, time is also money. I think that's one of the main criticisms of the legislation, is that it doesn't really understand the value of speed when it comes to constructing. Yes, you want to avoid hasty and unthought projects, but you also need to make sure that you're not delaying projects by years and adding more financing costs and adding more regulation, adding more lawyer costs to it. So California is the worst when it comes to this, and I think it's pretty well documented at this point. I've been saying this for a long time now. A lot of people are also talking about it. So if we can unravel CEQA and understand that maybe the solutions for a previous day and age are now our problems, I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, CEQA removing that from the process, I guess, doesn't necessarily mean that developers can now build whatever they want. There are plenty of other regulations and layers of governing entities.
Yeah, it's hard to judge the quality of the legislation right now. And I mean, this is, again, talking about infill housing. So this is not about saying, hey, you know that pristine creek and pond over there, let's build a bunch of apartment buildings. No. This is talking about, hey, look, that empty lot, that parking lot, that underutilized space, let's use that space and unlock it to make sure that we can continue to develop and continue to add to our housing stock, which is desperately required.
It will definitely help. Those parcels are very hard to build anyway. It is a already challenging site. So removing as many layers as possible to support more housing, I don't see it as a bad thing.
Yeah, well, let's hope that it makes a difference. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff takes a while to come into play. And of course, the biggest problem is actually financing costs. The interest rates right now don't make it very easy to build in general, but hopefully this will make it slightly easier.
Yes. All right, moving on to the next subject. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is making major leadership changes initiated by the Federal Housing Financing Agency. The new director, Bill Pulte, who got appointed in March 14, he has fired the CEO of Freddie Mac and also 14 board members from both entities and appointed himself as a chairman of both boards, taking leadership, and probably his new board members will follow. He himself has a very interesting background. He's the grandson of William J. Pulte, who is the founder of the Pulte Group, one of the largest home construction and real estate development companies in the U.S., and is also a Fortune 500 company. I'm very interested into seeing and learning what the goals are for these changes, because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they are the largest mortgage companies in the U.S.
So is this part of just general, I guess, trying to make government more efficient? Is this part of that regime?
I would like to think so. From a real estate developer perspective, there were some hurdles in getting these loans. Freddie Mac, for example, they have a program called Plus Seller and Servicer. In order to be the administrator of a loan for this company, you have to have a qualification process, which has a very high measure in terms of looking at your revenue, looking at your tax filings, so on and so forth. There are only a handful of companies who are allowed to directly work with Freddie and Fannie, and there is also an umbrella of subsidiaries who work with them. You can see it in my explanation. There are layers of administrative processes already.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I feel like it's such a personal name, like Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae, like people that you know. But I think people know of these places and they know they have something to do with mortgages. But what are the downstream effects of this? What does changes in these two institutions have to do with how the economy is affected or how this affects the everyday American consumer?
To put on my optimistic lens on it, I mean, if they can make actual effects on increasing the efficiency of the administration and maybe also have control over, relaxing the terms for the mortgages, it may broaden their market and also help potential home buyers, because these two agencies are the largest mortgage providing companies, not just for real estate developers, but also for you and I, like individuals. The reason why Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac has been governmentized in the first place was because it was prone for corruption. And they were also a part of issuing, bad mortgages. So the government has took them under control to avoid any bad actors in the processes. If this privatization effort is done right, it can mean streamlining the process, getting rid of the middleman maybe, and try to, have a direct connection with the market and helping the market support the housing demand side. But if it goes the other way around, it may be a starting point of another 2018 crisis.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, every week we talk about something happening in the administration and how they're affecting change. A lot of it is under the guise of government efficiency. I think that's just the Steelman argument. I think the pessimistic argument is that this is basically just trying to reform government in the first place in the vision of whoever's in power. We'll see how things play out there. Moving on to the other side of the world, there's a new airport announced in Athens. This isn't an airport in the Middle East or China or somewhere like that. This is in a European country, one that has actually done quite well after faltering quite a bit during the early part of this 21st century. So Athens is expanding their airport to a capacity of 40 million passengers, up from 26 million passengers currently. The firms that are involved are Grimshaw and Haptic, leading the major expansion of the airport, and another consortium of consultants that includes Arup, Leslie Jones, K Studio, and the design manager Plan A. So the project basically involves phased upgrades to the main and satellite terminals. New design features include a north and south oculi. It feels like everywhere you need an Oculus. 24.5 meter high garden filled halls with lounges and shops, so make it much brighter, much nicer. And the first phase is expected to cost around $680 million US. So the airport was originally built by Hot Chief and opened in 2001 ahead of the 2004 Olympics. I was there this summer. I don't think it's a great airport, so I'm glad to see that it's going to be renewed a little bit. But it is quite surprising. I wasn't expecting Athens to do this. It doesn't seem like the part of the world where new airports are hot. But if you think about it in the context of the Mediterranean rather than greater Europe, it starts to make sense because there is an increasing focus on that part of Europe, southeastern Europe, as a hub for tourism, and especially because it's essentially located between Western Europe, Northern Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and easily accessible. So, Minku, I'm curious, what's your take here?
Well, it is a great timing. I mean, they're betting big on tourism. So in 2024, last year, they hit the historical high record of revenues generated from tourism. It was like $23.5 billion. That's a lot of money. And actually, the old airport that you were at, that they announced a new development project there called the Mini Dubai. It's their nickname, and they're planning to have luxury residentials, hotels, resorts, casinos, all occupying the oceanfront with all the views. So we'll see what happens, but it is a good momentum. I mean, where can you find a new development this scale happening globally these days? However, we also have learned from the past, like projects like Songdo. It was a new master planned urban center next to Incheon Airport when they were planning the new airport's expansion in Korea. So, and that we know that the ambitious development project had similar programs, including high-end residentials, cultural museums, sustainability aspects and all that. But then the project went downhill because of the economy, and it is very tied together because these type of projects are heavily relying on international investment, overseas investment. Currently, I don't see us at a very optimistic stage in the cycle, probably at the bottom of the cycle, some might argue. So it'll be interesting to see how this project pans out.
Yeah, my take is that this is Greece going all in on tourism. You mentioned the adjacent projects that are going all along. I think it's also helpful for people to understand that usually new airports are not done in isolation. The previous airport in Athens was done in anticipation of the Olympics. They're often combined somehow, packaged somehow, even if not directly, with other types of projects going on. You can see that all around the world, simply because the airport brings people in to go spend money, and so you need to have places also for people to spend that money. When I was in Greece this summer, I was there for a wedding. I flew back to London, and I was on a British Airlines flight, and the entire flight was Americans from North Carolina. I think Greece is going all in on trying to capture the rich American, the wealthy American clientele. I think that they're trying to become a center for vacationing in the summers for the Western world, but also because of its proximity to the Middle East, I think it's also extremely accessible. And I don't know on the policy side how this is affecting things. It's always been easier to get into Greece than other parts of the EU, either to get a passport, to invest, to do that, a visa, basically. So I see this as maybe an extension of that. We'll see how things play out.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, Boston skyscraper One Lincoln sells for $400 million at auction after a previous evaluation of $1 billion. I mean, talk about a loss. So the building is 36 stories tall. It's in downtown Boston, and it's taken a big hit on its value. It was recently refinanced at $1 billion. So post-pandemic, 3 years ago, by the former owner, Fortis Property Group, but then it's since foreclosed, I guess due to vacancy. The winning bid at Friday's auction came in from an affiliate of BDT and MSD Partners, which is a merchant bank headquartered in Chicago and New York. Minku, you're not far from there right now in Boston. What does this mean, and what does this signal for, I guess, the city itself, but also downtown revitalization in the American city these days?
Hey, the urban cores of financial districts, underperforming real estate isn't really news now. Like, everyone knows. But also the real estate development industry was questioning, like, why aren't these buildings hitting the market? And we were speculating because, probably, these are portfolio owners, these are legacy owners. They may have a deep interest reserve that they can spend the time and see how the market turns. But like, a great example is one at Lincoln Street. Like, now probably it's signaling that we're end of this wait term, and there needs to be an immediate change happening. Otherwise, these buildings will have to be changing hands on a much lower basis than what it was 2 or 3 years ago, in order to even think about something different, some different use. I know that the city of Boston, especially, they have extended recently the office to residential conversion tax incentive. And they're also allowing student dorms to be proposed in this financial districts. I think those are great ideas, but there aren't many buildings that we can get our hands on. Yeah. Maybe this signals some large change that will be occurring very, very soon. Like, I have heard that the mortgages of the majority of the office portfolios are getting up this summer around August. So maybe we'll be seeing more of these larger buildings changing hands. So it is, in a way, a very sad time for commercial real estate. However, it's a very interesting time to see, as an observer, how the city centers will be transforming.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the office to resi conversion. It's a topic that everyone thinks makes a ton of sense, and then when you look at the actual plans of the buildings, sometimes they don't. I mean, the building we see on the screen right here, it's massive. I'm sure that the cores are all at the middle. It's going to be hard to fit a bunch of units that actually get enough daylight. It's only going to occupy the perimeter. There's been a lot of reports that have been done by Gensler and other organizations that have demonstrated that this is not easy to do in Boston, New York, San Francisco, any of these hard-hit downtown areas. It is definitely something worth pursuing, but I'm not sure that this is going to happen right now. So I guess before we wrap up, is this a good investment? $400 million for a $36-story building in downtown Boston?
I would think so in the long term. If you're looking out for 20, 30 years, for sure. Why not?
So it depends on your investment horizon.
Exactly. And especially with a 60% discount, who wouldn't like to invest on it?
So is the play basically, let's buy it at $400 million and expect in 15 years it goes back to up to $1 billion?
Well, that could be a play, just a refinancing effort, and maybe there is a more patient capital who's willing to bet on the revitalization of the city centers. So they are going to buy and hold to see if the market turns. Because I also don't see this building being converted to residential. If it does get converted to residentials, the units will be massive. The windows will have to be all removed and changed to operable windows. And maybe you can be creative, and you need to have at least some offsets, or penetrate the massing to bring in some daylight. But that's also very expensive. So I'm clueless. I'm clueless, but also very interested to see what will happen. What will be the new proposal for these buildings?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you go to the store and you see something on sale, and you wouldn't. It's something you wouldn't expect to buy going in, but you see the price tag. At the same time, sometimes I'm sure these are also. This is domestic purchase, so it's also not an investment from overseas, which maybe is parking money in real estate. There probably is a plan somewhere, but the people I know also in San Francisco are basically banking on the turnaround later on. But that's also a bit of a problem, because the turnaround's not going to happen unless things happen sooner rather than later. And meanwhile, most of the investment is looking like way down the line. So
yeah, the construction costs are still high. The interest rates are still high. There's no signs of it coming down, especially the new tariffs that will be. That we'll all find out next week.
Well, it's an interesting note to end on. A lot of changes happening in the world, destruction, but also possibility, construction. This has been Real Quick with me, Alex Yuen, and my co-host, Minku Kang. Hope you enjoyed listening, and remember to like and subscribe to the Most Modern Podcast here on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple.
Most modern.
Most modern.
Most modern.
Most modern. 모스트 보던 팟캐스트